got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell! Right now. Get up, go to your windows, open them, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. Things have got to change.
How many stations does this go
at? You've got to get mad.
67. I know it goes to Louisville and Atlanta.
We're not going to take this anymore. Then we'll figure out what to do about the depression and the inflation and the oil crisis. But first, get up out of your chairs, open the window, stick your head out and yell, and say, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
Who are you talking to, Howard?
CDP Atlanta.
Are they yelling in Atlanta here?
I'm not going to take this anymore.
They're yelling in Baton Rouge.
Get up out of your...
Son of a bitch! We struck the mother load!
Stick your head out of the window, open it, and stick your head out and keep yelling and yell, I'm as mad as hell, I'm not going to take this anymore. Just get up from your chairs right now. Go to
Where you going? I don't want to see if anybody's yelling.
Open it and stick your head out and yell and keep yelling. I'm not going to take it anymore! I'm not going to take it anymore!
God, truer words are never spoken. That's why I got out of that industry. I wanted to say things like that, but they wouldn't let me. So here I am. Everybody knows our next guest, the producer along with his amazing wife, Kimberly, and host of the film Thrive, Foster Gamble. As a sensitive being who looked at the legacy of his family's business, the products which entered virtually every American home and far beyond, Procter & Gamble, Foster came to understand that the production of these household and personal products had deep implications for the planet's ecology. This realization took Foster onto a path of discovery that is endless. Ultimately, he amassed enough knowledge and connections to launch the Thrive movie and internet platform for global connection and change. Today, he speaks about our need to come together in a new, more generous and more collaborative way for the emergence of the new energy movement and all of its needs and complexities. Please welcome Foster Gamble.
Whew, that is a tough act to follow. Oh man, I am so honored to get to do this with this group. I love having my mind blown, you probably know that. And these last few days have been a really rich experience of having my mind continually blown by as amazing a collection of people as I have ever come across. And I am privileged to get to be the one to stand up here right now. And I'll tell you, from the conversations I've been having, every single person in this room could be the one standing up here right now, and it would be awesome. I wish we had time for that, but that's what we're doing. That, you know, with the internet and everything, that is what we're doing. So I want to start by, this will probably happen later too, but this can't happen too often. I want to start by sincerely thanking Jeroen and Maddie and Robert and the whole team for not only having this intention, but for having this perseverance. I mean, you're talking floods, we're talking rainstorms, windstorms, change of venue. So stand up a second, let's hear it for those guys. And next, I want to send Kimberly's love to all of you. She's very sorry not to be here. And I just get moved talking about her. And obviously, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for her. The film, if I had made it, wouldn't have been nearly as good. It wouldn't have appealed to so many people because she brought that blessed, critical feminine energy in there and taught me how to speak about really challenging topics, dangerous topics, in a way that women would want to hear about it, and that young people would want to hear about it, and that people would trust it to pass on to their friends. And so I carry her with me everywhere I go, and she sends her love and thank you for what all of you are doing in the world and for sharing the Thrive movie the way so many of you have been doing. Thanks for that. So, I want to, this is working. I want to give you a quick preview of what we're going to be talking about. The BEM crew has been very generous in giving me this time. I was delightfully surprised because I'm usually short on time in a talk like this. For those of you who might have been confused, some people thought I was going to give the same lecture and then an hour later give it again. That's not going to happen. So we're just going to keep going. I'm going to cover what I think is most vital for right now for this group. And then I hope to have some time for interaction, because that's the part I enjoy most. And with this amount of time, it's too long for you to sit and just listen to one talking head. So we'll just dance with all that. So let me give you a quick preview of what I want to cover. First, I want to talk about the human relationship, and in particular, my relationship to energy and power. And then I want to talk about the relationship of the Thrive movement to new energy. I've got a lot of exciting updates for you on that. And then I want to put the whole thing in the context of our global predicament that makes it a lot more challenging at times, and yet is at the same time teaching us exactly what we need to learn to be powerful enough to bring all of this through at this unprecedented moment in history. And then I want to talk about solutions, because that's why we made the whole movie. And one of the main aspects of solutions is bringing whole energy access devices safely and successfully out into the world. Then I want to read a poem. Some of you have heard it before, but I was moved on an airplane flight once to the Extraordinary Technologies Conference in Albuquerque. I was just up at 30,000 feet and thinking about you, thinking especially about the inventors and what they go through. I've had the privilege to be involved in this field for 15 years and with mad scientists all my life. I might be one. I just kind of try to cover it up a little bit. And then we'll go into the Q&A. So let me talk a little bit about energy. Energy is who we are. It's what we need and are fighting over. It's what's used to control people. I think my conscious relationship with energy started in the experience that I illustrated in the Thrive movie when I was told by my teachers in elementary school to duck and cover. they turned the siren on. We were all supposed to imagine this nuclear war was imminent, and I was under the desk like that. And that was the moment. Well, it was actually probably the most traumatic moment of my childhood. I was blessed with fantastic parents, so my trauma came mostly from elsewhere. And so that's the moment when I decided, okay, these adults probably really don't know what they're doing here. So I'm really curious. And then I went off to a boarding school in the East Coast when I was 14. So I was kind of alone and scared, and I really had this whole nuclear thing in mind, and it was right during the actual occurrence of the Bay of Pigs thing, and we were being informed about that, and it was as close as we've come, at least to the public knowledge, to nuclear war. And so I was carrying this a lot, and then I was in my bed one night, and all of a sudden I'm woken up to this siren is going, these bright lights are blinking through the window, and there's this deep growling sound. I'm like, oh no, this is it.
Oh boy.
We've done it. So literally I jumped out of bed, ran under my desk, and I'm thinking, no, this isn't going to work. What actually was happening, thank goodness, was that there was the first snowstorm of the year, and this snowplow was growling along the road outside my room. It had a siren and these lights going on. So it was a tremendous relief, but it also reminded me how easily that could be the real thing. So that was the same year that I had the vision that I described in the movie when I was riding on the school bus and looking out the window, and probably the light blinking through the trees helped put me in trance, and all of a sudden I'm looking at a full-blown atom with these electrons going around it. I'm like, whoa, that's interesting. I was studying atomic physics at that time, and before I get off into that, so then the atom transforms into this solar system with the sun at the center and these planets going around the outside. I'm like, oh, there's really a similarity in that pattern. And then the whole thing went into my body, and I just had this total kinesthetic sense that I was that pattern. And I estimate I'm like halfway in between in scale between this tiny little thing and this vast solar system. So that was the day that I got obsessed. And from that time on, it was like, you remember in Close Encounters of the Third Kind where this guy's building the mountain out of mashed potatoes?
Yeah.
Well, after sports in the afternoons, I would go back up to the physics lab, and I was building something. And nobody knew what I was building, including me. But I was very intrigued with the refraction of light. So I took this great big flashlight, this light generator, this beam, and I started refracting it in glass blocks. And I just kept refracting it, and finally what I ended up doing was taking it around in a complete loop until the light came in on itself. And I was like, ooh, maybe that's it. So I remember turning off the light and looking, and I was just in bliss. There was this floating torus of light in the physics lab. And I'm running around telling all my friends, this is it, this is it, this is what I've been building. And they're like, whoa, that's really cool. What is it? I said, I have no idea, but this is it. Now I'm beginning to understand what that was. And more importantly, I'm increasingly grateful for the inner guidance that was showing me that. Because what I really get now, it was trying to teach me in every way that it could how we can relate to energy. What is energy? How is it dancing, and how can we dance with it instead of trying to blow it up or crush it or explode it or burn it or whatever. And so that's a lot of the quest that ended up leading me on my path. And it went from this whole nuclear fear to geometry. I became really preoccupied with how does nature build. And a friend introduced me to Arthur Young, Reflexive Universe, the Walter Russell, The Secret of Light, and who was the third? Oh, and Bucky Fuller, Synergetics. So when I would go on vacation for years, I would be sitting, on the beach or sitting on a mountaintop, backpacking or something like that, and I would be reading Synergetics. And didn't know why, but I was absolutely compelled to understand how nature builds and how nature moves. That led into the new physics, and from the new physics, I was led back into ancient cultures, and came across people like Graham Hancock and Michael Tellinger and Nassim Haramein and the others who are really tying the wisdom together across the ages. And then that led into extraterrestrials, because I had seen a UFO during college, but I had never actually encountered a being, and I was still very skeptical, even though that window never closed in my mind. But the evidence was piling up that not only are they here now, but they've been here for a long time, and I was curious about why. So let's move on to the power a little bit. I'm sure most of you know this quote from Tesla. Ere many generations pass, our machinery will be driven by a power obtainable at any point of the universe. It is a mere question of time when men will succeed in attaching their machinery to the very wheelwork of nature. Well, my studies for the last 3 or 4 decades have been into that wheelwork. So I had a strong sense when I came across this quote, oh wow, he not only saw it, but he was figuring out how to access it. So I want to show you an animation that I created. I worked for 2.5 years on a project called the Atomic Geometry Project. Those of you who've seen the movie know that I co-founded a think tank for about 3.5 years called the Sequoia Symposium, where we dealt with all sorts of scientists and mystics, near-death survivors, really trying to find the fundamental pattern and to try to verify whether or not the vector equilibrium as the structure and the torus as the flow were in fact fundamental. And it turned out that at every level, we had nuclear physicists there, we had chemists there, we had biologists, we had psychologists, we had astrophysicists. So they ended up all confirming that, at my level, those two seem to be the fundamental pattern. So then we got very excited about that and sat around and thought, that's great, now so what? And the so what was, how do we apply this knowledge? So we broke up into smaller teams, and one team went off and started writing physics papers. And those of you who know Nassim's work, that's what's come out of that, because he was at that conference. And then another team went off and started building new energy technology. And I started a team that did this atomic geometry project. And basically our notion was, if the vector equilibrium is the fundamental structure, the isotropic vector matrix as a field, if you know that term, and the torus is the fundamental pattern of sustainability, then the combination of those two must predict the periodic table of elements. And I mentioned this to some of my acquaintances who at Stanford and MIT and those places. No, forget it. It's all quantum foam. But this whole as above, so below thing is, seems pretty consistent. So I thought, okay, we're going in. So we developed 16 postulates and started building. I worked with especially a man named Robert Gray, who did all the mathematics in Bucky Fuller's Synergetics. And he's fortunately a computer scientist, a physicist, and a geometer. So he and I would work together on postulating the geometries, and then he would build them. And the program would actually tell us whether or not it would fit. And I'll show you what I mean by fit, because when light is moving as a loop, as in an electron, apparently it's moving at the speed of light, and when you get a charge moving at the speed of light, you're going to get a magnetic field, depending on which direction. The polarity is going to depend on which direction it's rotating. So when you put those fields together, near each other, they're either going to draw each other or they're going to repel each other. So that became the gear mechanism for putting together all of the 92 elements and all the 7 rows. Because we began with, okay, if torus is fundamental and hydrogen is fundamental, then hydrogen's a torus. And it turned out that when they do the quantum math on that, they draw it as a torus. And then helium is 2 toruses. And then from there on it starts splitting because instead of just being basically a double torus, it has to fit the next vector equilibrium. And that means it's building toward 8 electrons on the outside, which all of the noble gases have. So let me show you an illustration that we did. This is the argon. This is our model of the argon atom. Pretty old software. GlobalBEM is here today. He's the one who did all the visual effects for Thrive. He's probably cringing at this, but this laid the groundwork for what he did. So what we've got here is, if you could follow it all the way into the center, you'd have a double torus. You have actually a single torus surrounded by a double torus, and then it jumps out to the first layer, and then it jumps out to the second layer. And this is the second layer. Neon would be the first one, argon would be the second one. So these are what we're postulating as the electrons in the outer shell, where it's basically a torus, but it's a torus, it's not a thing, it's just whirling energy. And each torus is connected with the whole, with everything else, and it's connected with the center. So there's a vortex, there's a spiral vortex going all the way into the center in each of them. So we had to balance out how can the energy go in and the energy come out without colliding, and then how can all of these fit? What are the proportions at every scale? And so I'll show it to you moving again. So each one of those tori is moving at the speed of light. And I don't know what speed the argon atom would be going at, but this is super fast. So what we were trying to do is say, okay, if you could fly down into an atom, what would it look like? And it ends up, you get a wheelworks. And basically those 16 postulates ended up predicting every single layer of the periodic table where the number of protons and electrons is consistent according to these basic patterns, but also the patterns as you're building out between layers, where the vector equilibrium is the completeness. That's the noble gas, that's the inert elements. In between there, you have to go through these intermediate steps, and it's all simply the most efficient energy patterns, which end up being the Platonic solids. So with those kinds of postulates, we ended up illustrating the whole periodic table. So this, to me, is one way of looking at the wheelworks. So it didn't really surprise me, even though it continues to thrill me, that every single lab that I've ever visited that is successfully accessing new energy is in some way acknowledging or mimicking the toroidal pattern. Okay, raise your hand if you, I won't take this personally, but if you haven't seen Thrive, raise your hand. Okay, especially for those of you who haven't, but also for those of you who have, this might be a good review that we tried to cover as quickly as we could and still make it really entertaining and thorough. Basically the new energy predicament, the possibilities and the predicament that we're in. Volume.
It turns out that scientists as far back as the early 1900s have been developing alternative ways to access electricity without combustion. Nikola Tesla believed he had tapped into what he called radiant energy.
So as I looked at energy over the years, I saw the fusion and the fission And I went to Princeton where they've been doing that tokamak fiasco for several decades, spent billions and billions of dollars trying to crush atoms together. And I've got a great Alumni Weekly thing where they describe it, how they're really close. If all they need is a few more $1 billion, they're going to get it this time. But as they reach these higher temperatures, these electrons turn unruly and escape through the side of the steel barriers. I think there's a social lesson in there somewhere. So one of the things that I'm going to do today is try to share with you as best I can the bird's eye view of this movement that I am incredibly privileged to have, because when we put out the movie, a lot of brilliant inventors saw that Kimberly and I had done our homework and that we were committed to getting this out and that we were also willing to take some risks. So we have been contacted by probably 400 inventors now, about half of them in the new energy field, and the others in primarily water revitalization and purification, agriculture, health, and thank God now in decontamination. And so So I've gotten a chance to see somewhat what's out there and to meet these amazing people. A bunch of you are in the room here who've had a chance to meet, and I'm really enjoying meeting more of you as time goes on. But the two of the things that I've noticed, I'm under non-disclosure with almost every project, so I can say very few specific things, but I can share some generalities that inspire me. And one of them was the commonality of the torus. Another is that a lot of these technologies, when they run their electricity into a traditional copper wire, the electricity runs cold. And when they go to charge a device, the device is charged much faster than usual without blowing out the device. And then the other one that I especially love is what the scientists have given a nice scientific male term called load following. But it's really the abundance of the universe blowing your mind. Because there are certain devices that I've had a chance to see where you plug in a drill and you start running it, and that runs fine, and then you plug in a space heater or a lamp or something like that, and instead of grinding the electricity down, grinding that motor, that generator, whatever down, the device simply accommodates it. Just gives you more energy, so it actually lifts up instead of grinding down. So it's as if the universe were going, oh, you need some more? Here it is. Be careful, just take care of it. But as long as you're careful with it, as long as you're not violating it, we'll give you whatever you need. And that has been such a lesson for me. When the first real mind blower of my life was when I came across the nonviolent martial art of Aikido, because I had a deep inner sense that there must be a way to be powerful and to be gentle at the same time. And I had studied other martial arts, and I wasn't finding that I learned a lot about defending myself, but usually at the cost of the other person. And Aikido was the first one to show me that there is a way. And of course, it's about recognizing your toroidal energy form, recognizing another person's toroidal energy form, and even if they're attacking you, humbly step out of the way, literally recreate their intention, therefore taking away any conflict, neutralizing the attack, and then resolve the conflict without injuring the person, either by immobilizing them or disengaging in them. And I ended up studying and teaching that art for 15 years because it was such a revelation to me. And it's informed everything that I've done since then. It's throughout the movie, even though we only mentioned it once, it informs everything. And so when I came across free energy, I wasn't surprised. I was delighted, but I've been looking for it because I figured that there must be a way where if you can recreate in the same way that if somebody's, if a kid's nagging you about something and you ignore them, they're just going to keep asking you. But if you turn around, look them in the eye, and actually answer their question honestly, that communication's gone, and then the communication goes to the next level. And it's the same thing in Aikido. If you get out of the way of somebody's attack, then both of your energy goes to the next level. And what I found with all these devices is that as long as you dance with it, the energy keeps going to the next level. And in the early days, I know that a lot of the inventors were making spheres, or they were making cubes, basic building blocks of the universe type thing. And they tended to either fry or freeze because the system wasn't open. They were trying to contain it once again, rather than have this torus which breathes with the universe, brings energy in, and lets energy out the other side. So I'm really fascinated with the whole phenomenon of load following. And I notice in my own life that if I kind of treat life like that, that life tends to much more give me, what I need. I personally am gravitating toward the devices which have to do mostly with resonance or rotation or geometry, spirals, vortexes, that type of thing. I'm checking out very actively, but more leery of the of any radiation technologies, including the leaner technologies. And it just moved me to tears 2 nights ago to see Mark Leclerc and to hear what he and his partner, his colleague, had gone through being around that device. So it's one of the things that I want to learn about, and those of you who have expertise in that, please educate me as we go forward in this, because even at the tiniest level, I think if we're cleaving or fusing, I think it's very risky, and I don't think we need to. At least the devices I've seen that don't bother with that, it's got all the energy that we need. I want to say one more thing about the torus, which is these devices are not only going to get rid of pollution and get rid of carbon tax and get rid of smart meters and on in terms of the poverty, hunger, all of that. But they also change the paradigm. Because when you've got a device that you just can't argue with its accessing infinite abundance, it's a lot easier to go, oh, well, maybe we do live in a universe of infinite abundance as long as we dance harmoniously with it. So there's another level beyond that which is really important for me, which is the relationship of the torus form to consciousness. And for me, that's the greatest gem of all. And I think it has been as brutally suppressed as the devices throughout the centuries, because I think that there has been esoteric knowledge about the power of the torus in consciousness that those who would want to control other people's lives seized a hold of, and then went about confusing people or hiding that knowledge or punishing people who came across it. The interesting part is I think that they then tried to use that technology, but couldn't very effectively. That's why in a lot of the satanic things and so forth, you'll have these sacred geometries, but they're always inverted or they're twisted or there's something, because I think that the consciousness of trying to use that for control literally twists the experience. And the technology that I'm talking about in terms of consciousness, I'll give you a couple of examples. I had a very powerful experience, life-changing, at the Monroe Institute about 27 years ago. And for those of you who don't know about it, they've been exploring the beyond-the-body experience for now about 40 or 50 years. And they've got many teams of adepts who are incredibly good at it. And most of them got trained initially on this hemisync, which is this binaural beat. You listen to these headphones, and it has a different beat in each ear that sets up a beat frequency. And they can then adjust that beat frequency into the alpha range, into the theta range, whatever. And it's just conducive. It helps you get there quicker and synchronize the hemispheres of your brain. So I was having amazing experiences there. And then one night the trainers had been kind of joking with us, calling us tape junkies. And I started to think, I wonder if I am a tape junkie. I wonder if I'm depending on this technology for the experiences that I was having. So after everyone else went to sleep, I went into my little soundproof, lightproof unit and did the inductions that they had taught us. And here's where the key to the technology comes in. There are many techniques, more and more advanced as you go along, but the fundamental one they always use is one you create what they call the reball, the resonant balloon. In your mind's eye, you create a torus around your body. with the energy coming out the top, going around back in your through your feet and spiraling up. Their logo is a torus with a kind of an ephemeral body spiraling out of it. And then along with that, they would teach you to chant and to find your resonant tone. And while you were visualizing that, you would find your resonant tone. And when you were doing those two things, when you recreated the torus, the energy torus, that's already there. You know, physically, you know, emotionally, mentally, causally, etherically, and so forth. It's already there. We're just recreating it. So literally, when you recreate it, the energy moves to the next level. And it happens by creating the torus and then tuning the torus. And pretty soon they don't even really like the out-of-body term very much, because if you get out of your body, literally, completely, it's tough to get back in. It's called death. But, but there's always this silver thread that is tied, they refer to it as, is tied to you. And then people who get very adept at it can do remarkable things. And as you learn to do it more and more, it settles your physical body. It helps to clear your emotions. It helps to clarify your mind. And then those go hand in hand with exploring new realms, and particularly altering your self-identity. You know, you go from this skin-encapsulated ego to, oh, this is pretty interesting, and then pretty soon you're the solar system, and then pretty soon you're the galaxy, and pretty soon there's no boundaries, but you still have a center. So when that happens, it tremendously liberates your consciousness. And at that point, you become a lot more difficult to control. David Icke was talking about this a little bit this morning, too. And he's done a great job of reminding people that the very first and most important thing that we can do about this agenda to dominate us is liberate our own consciousness. And then from there, the sky's the limit. You can do it whatever. And as you do, you end up finding like-minded people. And look at this. We're all over the world. We're finding each other. Am I hearing my guides? Anyway, just to complete that story, it turned out that I wasn't a tape junkie. I had just been served by the tapes, and when I did my own induction, I ended up having the most powerful energy experience that I had ever had up to that point, where pretty soon these just waves of energy were just going harmoniously up and down my body, and it was so ecstatic. I finally thought, okay, well, this is really cool, but once again, so what? You know, what do I want to do with this? So my first question to come to mind was, while I'm in this state, they had talked a lot about guides and guardian angels, and you know, I'm open to it, but I kind of had the thought that people use that as, you know, people to blame or people to get to do the stuff for you which you haven't done yourself or something like that. But they kept talking about it, and these are very sophisticated people in terms of consciousness and mind travel and so forth. So I thought, okay, if I have guides or guardian angels or whatever, if you're out there, I would really like a sign. Well, you got to be careful what you ask for, especially in that state. Like that, there were two luminous eggs of light, literally toruses of light, on either side of the bed I was lying on. And the warmth that was coming to me from these two light toruses was so powerful. It wasn't radiant heat. It was spiritual warmth. The tears just started streaming down my face. And I said, thank you, I will never have to ask again. But I still wasn't done. The night was young. So I thought, okay, is there anything else I want to ask? Like, yeah, I'd like to know what my purpose in life is. So I asked that question, and then the waves got more and more powerful. And pretty soon, Michael will enjoy this one with his talk about the pyramid this morning. I was suddenly in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, and I was next to the sarcophagus of it. I was sitting in a lotus position, and the energy started moving up my spine, and this was the first kind of Kundalini experience that I had had. But it got stronger and stronger. I'm like, whoa, I don't know if I want to go on this one. And it blasted through my crown chakra. And and it was like the walls of the pyramid opened up, and I shot out through the top. Next thing I know, it was absolutely quiet and dark. And then I started looking around, and I started making out stars. I thought, whoa, this is really interesting. I looked down, and there's the Earth, this gorgeous little blue ball. And I thought, okay, that's really neat, but what does that have to do with my purpose? And then I heard this sound, just kind of, and I look up behind me, and there's this light beam coming toward me, and it filled my body, and then went through my body down to the Earth and connected with what I could now see as light grids all over the planet. And when I was complete with that experience, I realized there were no words involved, but that was my purpose. And if I had to put it into words, it would be that I am here to learn more and more how to thrive and to teach whatever I can to anyone who's interested. So the Torus allows for those kinds of experiences on a consciousness level, not just a technology level. So we need to be aware of that suppression also and free that up. So let me talk for a moment about suppression. I think people are catching on more and more to what's going on, and I know that some very sophisticated people that I respect tremendously actually don't think that there's any suppression of free energy technologies. I think that that's dangerous, and I think it's usually a sign that they simply haven't done their homework sufficiently yet. And so for anyone who doesn't think that it has been going on, and it's particularly a poignant area for me because I've had friends killed and I've had friends disappear and I've had friends be threatened and gagged, ordered, and forbidden to do their life's passion. And so I'm very serious and sober about taking care of these inventors because the situation is changing, but it's certainly not safe yet. So for anybody who doesn't think it's going on, I recommend that you go to your search engine and just put in Tesla or Sweet or Inumada or Keeley, Farnsworth, Trombley, Searle, Pantone, Dollard, Tawari, De Palma, Langenberg, and the list unfortunately goes on and on and on. And then secondly, for those people who still think that a free energy device is not possible, I think the key thing is distinctions here, because free energy can be a very misleading term, as David Martin was pointing out the other day. We've got free air, but you still have to work to breathe it. You need a nose, and if you're out in space, you need some equipment. If you're underwater, you need some equipment. You gotta do something to make sure that you're getting it, but it's infinitely abundant. And I think that free energy more accurately means it's not like free beer, it's like free air. And this morning, Dr. Modell was talking a little about the distinctions of the second law of thermodynamics, and the key one for me is the system you're analyzing open or closed? Because as far as I know, second law of thermodynamics was fundamentally describing closed systems. And you can do a pretty sincere job of closing off a system, and you'll get that traditional behavior. I ultimately, as he was saying also, don't think that any system is closed, because every system is made up of molecules, which is made up of atoms, and they're completely open. So this whole notion of a solid thing needs to be inspected at a larger level. And then finally, if you have done any homework at a serious level on the ET presence on this planet, the evidence is so overwhelming when you look at the data of people like Stephen Greer and Richard Dolan, who's here this weekend. It's virtually undeniable, whether you've experienced it directly or not. When you have over 500 high-level military, government, and FAA people giving their witnesses, it's time to pay attention. So we need to protect these brave truth-tellers also. But the point that it leads to is, if they're here, and if they've been here for a long time, do you really think that they burned Exxon for 30,000 years to get here from the closest solar system? So it opens up the question of, well, okay, how do they access energy? How do they propel their ship? And how do they alter time and space in a way that they could actually get here in one lifetime from anywhere else in the so-called physical band? Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the predicament, the context for this kind of suppression. I want to read a quote from Chris Hedges. He brought it together quite nicely. He said, "We now live in a nation where doctors destroy health, lawyers destroy justice, universities destroy knowledge, governments destroy freedom, the press destroys information, religion destroys morals, and our banks destroy the economy." And I would add to that list that those who control our access to energy limit and conceal the true possibilities of accessing energy. So let's just look very quickly. Let's look very quickly at just those old flip books where you could see the little cartoon character moving. This is like a flip book of our current predicament. So we have the Patriot Act. We have the NDAA. We've got FEMA camps, and you can be kidnapped at any time and put in one of these camps or rendered to some other country. We've got Homeland Security buying over 2 billion hollow point bullets.
Oh, yeah.
That's enough, I think, to run an Iraq war for 30 years or something like that.
Yep.
And their first excuse was, oh, that's for target practice. Well, nobody uses hollow points for target practice. And so when they got busted on that, they said, oh, well, we're trying to save money by buying in bulk. So then we've got our drones. 30,000 authorized already over this country. We've got the urban drills that are including foreign troops. A lot of foreign troops coming in and participating now. And you got to ask yourself, why is that? Because studies show American military is less apt to fire on American citizens. So they're importing other humans to do that. And there's a lot of equipment moving around the country right now. We've got our friendly, we had one sentence, I think, in the Drive film about how all of your emails, texts, phone calls, and so forth are being captured and monitored. And then it just went on to the next topic of the movie, and a lot of people were like, no, really? Well, nobody's saying that anymore.
Oh.
And then we have your basic humiliating public violation. At the hands of the TSA, so to speak.
For your protection.
At least they wouldn't do it to children. Well, maybe they will. All right, then they've got their attempt to chip people, and this one is still ongoing, but it's one of the areas where I'm so proud of people for waking up and saying no to the National ID Act, and to all the different attempts that they've been doing to try to chip people to monitor and control them. Then you got your toxic pharmaceuticals and the various diseases and mass murders and so forth that they lead to. This isn't the fun part of the lecture, by the way. Then you got your GMOs, you got fluoride, you got chemtrails. For those people who think that this is just regular contrails, I have hundreds of pictures and videos from my house. I happen to look out over Monterey Bay, and so anytime they're there, I'm recording. And this was the first one I saw like that. It's like, oops, they must have forgot. It must have been a commercial flight that forgot some luggage or something. And then an hour later, they came back and did it again.
Oh, God.
So, give me another good exploration for that one. Okay, then you got HAARP doing all of its earthquakes and storm gathering, all that kind of stuff. And all of this is rooted fundamentally in the economic scam. Because wouldn't be able to get away with this in a free society. You would be prosecuted right away. You would be pressured out of business. You would not be able to receive insurance. You would not be able to have any business customers. You would be locked up. So I'm not going to go into this in depth. If anybody is uncertain that there is a financial scam going on, go watch Thrive. And this basically lays out the overt pyramid, where we're at the bottom, and then the government is on top of us, and we're trained to think that Obama's leader of the free world, and he's like the kingpin. He works for at least 7 levels above him, and his behavior over the last 6 years or whatever pretty much confirms that. And then, because above the government, it's become clearer with Citizen United and so forth that the government really works for the corporations. And now they're not even pretending that that's not true anymore. And there's a new bill now, somebody will remember the name of it, but there's a new Citizen United type thing that's going to go even further. Anyway, so it's legal bribery at the hands of the corporations, but the corporations are all, major corporations are all dependent on the cost of capital. And if you have questions about that, sit down with Catherine Austin Fitz. She'll explain it to you very clearly. But the key to they're not spending their own money on these big projects. They're borrowing it way cheaper than you and I could borrow, and that's what allows them to have those kinds of profits. One of the things. So they've got to have good relationships with the banks where they can get that kind of money. And then the big banks like Chase and Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, and so forth, they're beholden to the central banks. And virtually every major country has a central bank. I think in 2001 there were 7 countries left. Now I think there are only 2. I think it's Iran and North Korea. The rest of the so-called axis of evil has been central bankified. And then above the regular central banks are the IMF and the World Bank. And I want to say one quick thing about that, because this is a hopeful sign. There's a lot going on behind the scenes in the international financial markets right now, and one of the things is that the Asians and the BRICS countries are standing up to the Western Illuminati banksters, and they're saying, no, you screwed up. You're ruining our grandchildren's planet, and you don't get to be in charge anymore. And that's tough to say. People who could say that ongoingly to the Western bankers and get away with it, but particularly with China having 2 million man army and nuclear weapons and owning 80% of our debt, they're in a very strong bargaining position. You can't push them around. So people are actually needing to negotiate, and there are fantastic negotiations that have been going on and are, according to my sources, are getting resolved in very exciting ways. And one of them is that they announced at the G20 meeting a month ago, that they're coming out with a BRICS bank, where the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa put in appropriate amounts, totaling $100 billion to start with. And it's going to be an alternative to the World Bank and the IMF. And it's going to be asset-backed. That's the beginning of the end of fiat currency. And that's fundamentally... And along with that, they're developing a new rating service. The Wall Street rating services, of course, they're owned by the Wall Street banks, or controlled by the Wall Street banks. And when they actually did drop our credit rating, they were hauled into court immediately and threatened and all this stuff. And so very quickly, the rating went back up to AAA, even though the big banks are hundreds of trillions of dollars in debt, and you can see what the U.S. Treasury doesn't have.
And Foster, they did the BRICS new internet. You heard of that one too? They have their new internet. The cables later should be ready by the end of 2014, 2015. Wow. Same thing. I think it's bricscable.com or something.
Oh my God, that's
fantastic. Check it out. Oh yeah,
Thank
check
you.
it out.
Yeah, so there's very exciting things happening because there are a lot of, there's tremendous wealth in the East which the philanthropists are wanting to use to reboot the world. Not only reboot the world economic system, but the environment and to do tremendous debt forgiveness and to fund humanitarian projects. And I know people have probably heard rumors about this for a long time, but according to my sources, it is now rolling, and I think you'll be hearing a lot about it in the next month. So I don't want to say more than that about it because I don't want this to be a topic that I need to deal with a lot in public because I'm not ready to say enough about it to be authoritative, and I don't want to waste my time or anyone else's until it's proven real. Okay, so let's talk about the Thrive movement for a minute. So, given that everything, as far as I can tell, is in its existence only as a function of purpose, I want to start with the purpose, the mission of Thrive Movement. The mission of Thrive Movement is to catalyze informed conversations and empower self-creating strategic actions that transform the status quo so that everyone has the opportunity to thrive. So that's what we're up to. Let me give you a little bit of a status update. And this is not to toot our horn. This is to give you some great news about a lot of people have come up to me who don't subscribe to our email list or go to the website or something like that, and they say, I heard the movie was really great. Has anything happened since? So we made the film. Kimberly and I were totally aligned and committed to make the film as a trailer for the website. Because you see the movie, even if you see it 4 or 5 times, which a lot of people are, eventually it's the movie that you saw, and now what? So we wanted it to catalyze people going to the website, and then we built the website, spent 3.5 years doing it, to be a toolkit for the movement. So I'm happy to say that in terms of documented views, that means YouTube views, our website, and DVDs. We count each DVD as 1 view, and people are passing it around. They're having home screenings. They're having community screenings on a weekly and monthly basis. So it's documented over 19 million. It's probably more like 25, 30 million or more. Woo! Thank you. People a month in 27 languages. We put it out in 10 languages, and 17 different countries have come to us and said, we need this in our language, can we do that? And some of them were languages like Portuguese, which covers Brazil, and a bunch of dialects from India, which it's just reaching so many more people now. We were voted by the public the Transformational Film of the Year.
No kidding.
We were, at the same time that we were excluded from a lot of film festivals because we were too controversial. We didn't go to film festivals before the film came out because we didn't want to risk the exposure before it was spread on the internet and the toothpaste couldn't be put back in the tube. But we did apply to a bunch of, we got into some and won awards in some, but it was a shocking reminder to see that a film that popular would not be shown at these. It also reached the status of a #1 documentary in Japan, and we're currently doing a Thrive book with an agency in Japan. Kimberly and I toured more than 30 cities and just packed houses everywhere for screenings and Solutions Summit. Glenn Martin's here from Australia, who was there in Australia at Gold Coast when we did the screening there. I mean, we didn't do a screening. People had already seen it. We did a day-long Solutions Summit. And I'll tell you, those Aussies are ready to go. So, it was so fun. And one of the most exciting things for us in visiting these cities is that we get to see the good news. It's hard, it's easy to get bad news on the internet, real bad news. And it's easy to get false bad news on the corporate media. But to actually be reminded who human beings are, it's like the feeling that was in this room these past few days. We're seeing that everywhere. And people are not only ready to go, but they really want to get organized. And in a minute I'm going to talk about our Solutions Hub and tell you the kinds of tools that we're providing for them, which seem to be working very effectively. But it was been so positive for Kimberly's and my morale just to get out in the world and see, oh yeah, this is who humanity is once they're given the opportunity to be informed and do something about it. Our website is getting 50 to 100,000 unique visitors a week, and people are starting to explore the depth of it. In the beginning, people were just coming and seeing the movie or looking at the top 10 action list or something like that. You could literally go on that website for a year and not hit the same page a second time. So it's really in-depth a toolkit for people who are taking action. As of a couple of days ago, well, let me say it this way. As we traveled around, what we noticed is that people were spontaneously creating Thrive-inspired solutions groups and then taking on various issues. And so when we saw that everywhere and realized that a lot of them, for instance, every city we went to, somebody was working on GMOs. And they would approach us and say, you know, we're really taking this on, but we don't really have the information or know who to partner with. We need help in getting going on this. When you hear that from everyone, you realize if they just turn to each other, because we don't have the time to do that, was never our intention to do that, and it's not necessary. So one of our goals is to decentralize the sharing of critical information. So now they are on our Solutions Hub, they're posting petitions, and they're posting class action lawsuits, and resources, and funding sources, and all sorts of things like that, so that people don't have to recreate the wheel. So any group that's farther along is teaching the ones who are just catching on. So when I checked a couple of days ago, it is now, and this is what excites me the most of all, it's already 894 solutions groups in 90 countries. And they're taking on over 120 issues. And our team feels really proud, and I speak for them all, when I say that we have established a global reputation for accuracy. People challenged us up one side and down the other to try to undermine the film when it first came out, but we spent a lot of money and time having it independently fact-checked twice. So people realize, oh, okay, well, I have to try to do something else. You know, go after the Procter & Gamble angle, or he must be an Illuminati shill. All of that. I love that when they think Thrive was disinformation. It's like, yeah, I spent my entire life, virtually every penny I had, and took these risks to do what? Where's the disinformation? But I'm happy to say, I mean, there was a lot of military and agency trolls. You can really recognize them. They don't have a name, they don't have a bio, they don't have any friends. And their arguments are very shallow and uninformed, but they're nasty, and that's really the thing. They go on the comment boards to try to scare people off or just to undermine our reputation, and then they create debunking sites so that when people go to Google and they Google Thrive, first you get the movie, then you get the trailer, then you get 4 debunking sites. And it's unfortunately the era that we live in. One of the reasons why we're having to learn to be more and more discerning. But I'm happy to say that has all gone away now. Even there was one major Thrive debunked site, which was obviously highly funded and very diligently updated every day and so forth. And they celebrated the demise of Thrive on the 1-year anniversary of our premiere. Wow. and said, nobody's watching it anymore, it's dead, nobody cares, we did our job. So I wrote in a letter to them, which of course they buried on the last page with a little update. So here's what we're up to. Our main missions over the next 2 years is, one, we're going to be spreading and stabilizing the Solutions Hub to self-sufficiency, where it's really a decentralized international network that knows how to do it themselves. Secondly, we'll be launching a Thrive TV online channel. This is not a 24/7 channel. We're not trying to do that level. We've got a small team, and so many people are doing that anyway, and some of them are doing it really well. What Regina is doing with GAIAM, and what David Icke is doing with People's Voice, and Sean Stone is here somewhere. He's doing it with Buzzsaw, and just on and on, where people are telling the truth. They're actually not holding back, and the public is really, really responding. So what Thrive TV will mostly be is inviting anyone who's interested into our think tanks, because that's a lot of what we're going to be doing, is bringing together the best minds and souls that we can find in particular areas to strategize the transition from, you know, a quasi-police state to a free and just society on a healthy planet. Because a lot of people know the principles and know the goals, but in terms of actual solution strategies, we're all babes in the woods, it seems, in terms of sitting down and having respectful conversations with people with a slightly different ideology. So we're really looking at how to network other networks together in such a way that nobody gives up the trust that they built with their networks. So the coordinators of any network can gate any mailings that come to them about important actions or resources or whatever. They can decide whether or not they want to disperse it to their network. But if they do, I mean, there's so many things that, whether you're right, left, independent, non-political, whatever, there's so many things that people agree on, particularly if you start with shared values. So when you're talking about the banking scam and chemtrails and fluoride and GMO and all that kind of stuff, if networks would network with each other, the numbers that would be created and come out in terms of awareness, funding, and action, it's going to be game-changing. So that's one of the things that we will be doing. And I'm not going to spend too much time on it today, but the most important conversation on the planet to me is the conversation for true liberty. And most people don't know what I'm talking about. I'm horrified to know how many people I've talked to who, even though they don't want to be violated themselves, that they think that they are so rich or so white or so enlightened or so smart, so successful, whatever, that they actually should be controlling vast numbers of people. And to actually say that to my face, like, oh, okay.
Wow.
Have this basic white paper out so that people can use it as a reference when all of basically it's a paper about the usual mind traps. Yeah, but what about, well, the basis for this is if you agree that nobody should have rights that anyone else doesn't have, and nobody should be violating anyone else, well, there goes government.
That's true. Woo! Yeah!
Now, you would think that a shrewd politician would build in some sort of legislation to make it illegal to even talk like that. That's right, I think it's called treason. It's illegal to question the most destructive concept in the history of the world. So that's the dilemma that we're in. So when I start talking about this much more publicly, and people say, yeah, but who built the roads? And what about the poor people? And what about the sick people? And what about educating my kids and so forth? Each of those questions will already be answered. If you truly want to know the option, the non-governmental option, which not only could work, but it would work and work in a way that everybody has justice and prosperity, then those questions will be answered thoroughly, because those are the mind traps. And when I was learning about it from my son, I argued with him literally for months. And I had all my clever but what ifs, and I had all my political ideology that I had represented for a long time. And he just kept saying, Dad, I think you need to look a little deeper on this. And I finally realized I was in this fog of illogical thought, and I was standing on moral quicksand, and I'm finally like, okay, teach me. And he did. He was a major mentor for me in making Thrive. So listen to your kids.
What's his name?
Oh, his name is Trevor Gamble, and
how old is he?
He's 32, and he put a lot of his knowledge in a book which he has recently self-published called "The Secrets to Nonviolent Prosperity: The Principles of Liberty." So
awesome.
Check it out.
Woo! Great title.
Thanks for asking. I'll pay you later for that. No, it would have been a good idea to bring it, but it's available on Amazon.
Buster, did you go back one slide? One slide. Last bottom. Oh, great, thank you.
So one of my main teachers, and to me, perhaps from my point of view, the greatest living philosopher, maybe the greatest philosopher ever, because he stood on the shoulders of other ones and went beyond, is a man named Stefan Molyneux. He's, you know, Steph. Okay, he's a pretty young Canadian guy who's just really done his homework. And thank God he's an actor, debater, software programmer, and with a tremendous knowledge of history and economics. So he's really funny and entertaining, as well as being just mind-blowingly brilliant. And he just lays out the philosophy, the morality, and then a lot about what a truly free world could be like and how it would work. And I want to share this one quote from him, because it really brings it down to the fulcrum of the whole thing. In this era of relative ethics, it says, the greatest fight in the history of the world and the world of ideas is the fight to establish a universal morality. So let that one sink in a little bit, because we have been trained to kind of have ethical and cultural morality. Oh, well, it's okay to stone their women in this country because they suspect them of something. Oh, it's okay to cut off their hands when some starving guy steals a loaf of bread or something like that. And those are just a couple of myriad of examples, including in this country. But what Steph stands for with absolute rigor is that what we are missing, and if we're going to survive, is a universal morality. And that doesn't even mean just global. We're talking about a universal morality, and basically it is the non-aggression principle, the non-initiation of force against anyone else. So it's inconvenient in a way, because government goes away, all these handouts go away, all that type of stuff. But you'll find in the Thrive Solutions strategy, we're not just like cold-hearted about this. What we recommend is over time, a 3-stage strategy that really takes into account some people, a lot of people have been really screwed over by this system, many of them a lot worse than others. And if we're all part of that human body, then if your leg had this huge gash in it, you would want to take a lot of energy from the rest of your attention and put it on healing that. But in our Solutions Hub, one of the only 2 requirements is that your solutions do not create any new violations. So there will, for a while, be taxation. I long for the day when involuntary taxation is no longer there. But meanwhile, there will be. But if we simply cut the military budget in half, actually had a true defense budget instead of a global imperialist budget, and you got rid of the Federal Reserve, by my calculation. So that frees up literally trillions of dollars a year. And Lester Brown has in his Plan B, has estimated that it would take 192 billion, I think, to turn around the poverty, environment, health, and justice worldwide. 190 million a year. And we're talking about freeing up trillions. Billion a year. Freeing up trillions just from doing those 2 actions. So that helps to fund the transition. Okay, let me talk for a moment about the Solutions Hub. So you may remember from the movie that we had this, what we called the sector navigator, because we spent a long time, 10 years, with in think tanks with Barbara Marx Hubbard and the Foundation for Conscious Evolution and the Shift Project and a number of other groups, trying to all come to alignment on names for the sectors. We were all aligned about if the universe uses the vector equilibrium as its mother structure, we might as well do that too. So we had 12 with 1 in the center, and worldview was in the center. And we finally all came to agreement on these sector titles. And they're not the right ones, they're just the most useful ones we've found. And that's the only other requirement on the Solutions Hub, is that if you do use sector names, that you use these same sectors. Because what that does is allow us to have a global laser-like coherence in our collaboration, rather than everybody diluting and confusing the system. And here's the 2D version that starts taking on the toroidal aspect. And I want to spend a moment on this, because what we're trying to do is empower individuals to find their calling and take action effectively and have a great time while they're doing it. So what we recommend in our solutions toolkit and in our solutions workshops is that people who find out what's going on deeply enough that they go, I think I want to do something about that. Great. A lot of people contact us and say, well, what should I do? And I said, well, that would be back in centralized power. I have no interest in telling you what to do. But here are some tools that we have found really useful. And the first one is, it's not up here, but the first one is, take a moment, sit down, and write down your purpose in life. I found that I was ruffling some feathers in social situations when I would often ask them, oh, hi, nice to meet you. What's your purpose in life? So I do it usually more tactfully. I wait at least a minute or something like that. But the truth of the matter is that's what I most want to know about you. And then I want to know other details too, but it's shaping everything you do. So I want to know that because that makes it easier for me to support you and align with you. 10 minutes? Okay.
To a break? Because you have 2 hours.
Oh. Okay, how should we handle this? I was generously given 2 sessions. Do you want to take a break? I know it's a long time. Do you want to take a break and have people come back, or just people go in the restroom if they want to?
At 5:30 is the dinner break, which is in 10 minutes. There's a break anyway, and then it's up to Sasha and whoever's doing the panel to decide how to come back together again after dinner at 7.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately we got started a little bit late. I think the best thing for me to do then is to wrap this up as quickly as I can so we don't get too far behind schedule. So we invite people to ask themselves, what is your purpose? Once they're clear on that, then say, what sector are you most drawn to? Science, relations, education, environment, justice, health, and so forth. Then ask yourself, what level of engagement draws me the most? Am I someone who wants to meet immediate needs? Or am I someone who would rather work on systemic change? Or am I someone who feels more drawn to being part of the consciousness shift? Now, it may overlap those, but what we've found is it's very helpful for activists to try not to take on saving the entire world yourself, but to actually identify yourself in these ways, then start, go to the Solutions Hub or somewhere else and find people with similar interests that you can work with. Relax into doing your mission, your calling, in a supported way, while knowing that all of the other sectors and all of the other levels are being handled by really competent people. And it's true, every single solutions group we've ever been with, even if there's only 30 or 40 people in the group, all of the different sectors and levels seem to be handled. So here's a map on the Solutions Hub where you can find other groups. You can search by issue. We post updates on things that are going on from various groups around the world, and then also resources for effective action here. This is a Stop Smart Meters flyer, but those sorts of resources. So I want to briefly touch on Thrive Connect. I'm not going to have time to go into this much yet. And this is what I'll be talking a lot about in the future. But because we've been so blessed to be contacted by so many remarkable innovators, technological and social, economic, the whole thing, we have been asked by philanthropists who are looking to change the world very rapidly to identify the best projects that we can find in all 12 sectors. Fortunately, that was something we had already been doing for several years. So we were able to present to them a map of kind of the first wave of recommendations. And each one of these little pills here represents a project in each one of the different sectors. You can see happily, everybody gets bored by when I bring up infrastructure, but the free energy projects are in infrastructure. So these are all projects that we're relating to now, and in the process of not only helping them get the funding that they need, but we have assembled and continue to assemble the infrastructure to coordinate with all of these groups, but also to make sure they really have what they need. And that means, let me go to one of the first. Yeah. I spent a fantastic weekend at my home with Jeroen and Robert and Joel Garbon and Goa Loba a while ago, talking about GlobalBEM, the whole global energy movement, and we were all just kind of comparing notes. And there no violations and non-disclosures, but really talking about the generalizations of the field. And we ended up mapping kind of a concept to market layout. And so let me go over this quickly with you, because these are probably the most important things for this group that I have to say. So obviously you need labs or incubators to develop your technologies. Then, as Mark Dancy and Joel and Garrett Modell and others have been talking about, the vetting is critical. We need to have absolutely rigorous vetting. No hand waving, no smoke and mirrors. We got to get beyond that, because it's really decreasing the credibility of the field. And then the funding. You can call this whatever you want. You can call it gifting economy. You can call it provisioning, whatever. These inventors need some cash to feed themselves, to keep their labs secure, and get these inventions done and out. So someday maybe we'll be on a planet with no money. Meanwhile, we need these technologies out. So we're working hard on getting the money to the right places. And as well, they need security strategies. Of the many labs that I've been to, I would say probably only 2 did I go, oh great, you've got security handled. So that's critical for the safety of the inventors and also for everyone else getting benefit of the technology. And that doesn't mean, a mob of guys with AK-47s. If the FBI knows about you and they want to crash your lab, guess what? They're going to crash your lab. But if you've got multiple surveillance systems that are live streaming to remote locations, YouTube, the world sees that the next day. And it's going to be like NSA on steroids. It's like the world's going to go, oh, they are shutting down those technologies. I wonder why. Let's don't let that happen anymore. And we've got a fantastic security team that will be available for labs that need that. Legal as well. Legal structures and legal defense funds, to set aside money so that if they try to stop you with frivolous lawsuits, you're ready. Business models. Good. Very briefly, this is a spectrum of business models. A lot of people ask me, well, what's the right kind of monetary system for the world? And I said, to me, that's the wrong question. As soon as you're talking about the system, somebody's imposing their will on other people, and liberty's gone. So you're going to end up with a corrupt system. So what I'm looking for is a free market in currency, free market in everything, but responsible, honest. And same thing, free market in business strategies for getting technologies out. And on the far end is an inventor goes, wow, I did it. I'm going to give this to the world. It's on the internet that night. I don't know that it's happened yet, but I think that it probably will. The second one is giveaway with philanthropic compensation. There's one lab that I'm dealing with in South America right now. We haven't had a chance to send the vetting team down yet, but if they've got what they think that they've got, and my ideal would be to hook them up with these philanthropists. And they say, okay, what's your fair price to where you'll feel like, great, I feel fully rewarded. And so you'll put that amount of money in escrow, and then you put the plans in escrow, and then they both get released at the same time. So it's not a corporation coming in and taking the technology and shelving it, but it's an inventor getting rewarded, or his team or whatever, getting well rewarded for what they've done, but then just putting it on the internet. And that's the easiest way to get it out. Because if they try to stop you, it's a free speech issue, just like the Ellsberg paper, the Pentagon Papers, and that's already got court precedent. The lawyers can really stop them from doing that if you're willing to give it away. If you're selling it, then they can get you with commerce clauses and all this kind of stuff and tie you up for a while. But so that's the second one. And next is where you're making it open source and at the same time selling product or licensing product. I think a very viable way to go for certain labs. The whole patenting thing, if somebody goes for patents, you can do public patents, you can do regular private patents, you can do... I personally don't recommend patenting to any inventors because it's so risky, and David Martin can tell you all about that. He's the expert on that one. Because that's usually when they find out what you've got and come and rate it and you can't do it anymore. Some very good inventors are doing partial patents, where they're getting some proprietary rights over certain aspects of the technology, but they're not putting it out, they're not showing their whole thing, so that people don't know that they're talking about a new energy device. And some people are going for foreign patents. I think it's a little safer in some countries, but ultimately, it's not what I recommend. Though I honor someone if they want to do that, and it feels right to them. The key thing here is that each inventor, each lab, each business team should be free to choose the one that they want to go on, as long as they're not violating anyone else, and hopefully they're as informed as possible when they make that decision. And then there's Conscious VC. Some of you may know the Novus Via group, probably the most conscious venture capital I've seen, certainly in the area of new energy. And they got great people. They're treating their inventors really well. The inventors are collaborating. All the inventors own a piece of the larger company, so there isn't the usual infighting. It's a real paradigm breaker.
What was CAP? And for foundation, that one, humanitarian?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. This humanitarian business plan with the CAP, this has been quite popular with some of the labs that I'm working with. And this is basically a more traditional business model. I mean, some of these labs have $25, $30 million in already. And then, so they've got people who've really taken risks and put up a lot of their hard-earned money to try to make this stuff happen. So in situations like that, one of the alternatives that we're suggesting is you have your regular business plan, and then once your investors get 120% of their, or some number like that, of their investment back, then they continue to be rewarded, but it starts to taper. The percentage starts to taper down. And the gap between what they would have been making and what they have chosen to make, all of that goes into furthering the technology and distributing the technology in humanitarian ways all over the world. There's one group of philanthropists that we're working with right now who basically what they're proposing is if it's a nonprofit organization that's willing to give away the technology, then they will just give them the money and ask for nothing. If it's a for-profit organization, they'll take whatever appropriate shares are they get with the financial value that they put in, but they will take 100% of that money and use it for distribution for humanitarian purposes. So there's a lot of real win-win models coming out. And then traditional VC, I lived in Silicon Valley for years. I cringe at the very notion. But somebody mentioned the Bloom Box the other day. The Bloom Box is not a free energy technology, but it's an off-the-grid technology that's a major stepping stone. They got almost $1 billion from Kleiner Perkins. It's a major venture capital company in Silicon Valley. And now places like eBay and Google down in Silicon Valley, they're running off the grid. So the fact that they're allowed to run off the grid is a huge step for the rest of us when we actually bring in new energy devices. Okay. Oh, let me just go back and finish this list. So after the business models, networking and media. This is a critical simultaneous part, and this is what I just bow to the BEM group. And to Tom Vallone, what he's been doing since 1999 at least. I attended his first conference on future energy in 1999. And because creating the kind of awareness in the world where the paradigm is shifting, where these breakthroughs are being accepted intellectually, and then where the public can protect the inventors and the companies that are bringing it out is an absolutely critical part. So I'm so thrilled that these are being so well received. And then finally, marketing and distribution. Let me just, we're coming down to the last several minutes. So let me just say on that, number one, unless somebody just gives the technology away, I highly recommend to all the people that I work with that they coordinate their release with other releases, either of their own technology or with other labs worldwide. So the whole bunch of them come out. It's like whack-a-mole. If you're the only mole, and then we're exploring all sorts of fun and creative ways for actually announcing to the public. And an example is there's one famous rock star who's very much into free energy, who will remain anonymous so far. But he said, if you can bring me a working device, I will create a global concert. And we will run the concert on this, and during the intermission, we'll make the announcement, and we'll take the Steadicam backstage and show the device. That's so cool. So the way I kind of spun off of that is that then once people have seen the device, then they're going, whoa, that's amazing, but I don't know if it's real. At that point, you have a dozen people like Garrett Modell with the kind of academic credibility and rigorous testing and everything that he does, and other credit-worthy people, trustworthy people from our culture who will come forward and say, yes, I've been checking this out for 6 months, and I'm willing to stand here and say, this is real. And then on the big screen behind this panel comes up, okay, now this is in a village in South Africa. And here's one in a Native American tribe in Alaska. And here's one in Asia. And here's one in South America. And they're already using these technologies. And they also have the surveillance cameras, so if they start to get shut down, the whole world gets to watch that too. So, two quick things and I'm out of here. I want to read this quote from Goethe, which I oftentimes read it at times when it just feels like too much. And I know we all go through those from time to time, which is like, I don't know if this is worth it. Anyway, I love the way he says this. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. Yes. And I think we're all experiencing that. So I want to close by reading my tribute to the inventors. With deepest respect and awe, I salute you. The energy dancers, the alchemists, the wizards, the makers. At the heart of our problems are short-sighted constraints on energy, health, freedom, and peace. And you are at the heart of the solutions. You and I both know it's not magic. It's relentless, soulful curiosity and commitment. Humbled by repeated failures to learn from, informed by interdimensional and inner guidance, honed by endless hard work and the need to align rigorously with cosmic principles. You adventure in a realm where ego, false hope, hand-waving, and exaggeration have to crumble and fade away for success to be realized. Honoring the flows of nature for those moments of tingling illumination, when the mist of unknowing clears and you see beyond the shadow of a doubt and you have answered your calling. And then, even if you make it to the top of that mountain of successful innovation, there are more peaks whose ascent is required. Out beyond the dark shadows of jealous doubters and greedy, wounded suppressors, where you could share your dream come true with a hurting, confused, and ready world. Humanity is quivering at the edge of falling into oblivion or spreading our strong, capable wings and soaring toward a new horizon. Hang in there. You have a right to safety. Hang in there. You have earned our respect and you deserve our support. And now at last, as the Hopis say, we push off together into the center of the current and into the farthest reaches of the cosmos and of our imaginations made manifest. Beyond our fears, a match for the challenge, guided by love, toward harmony and thriving. Here we go.
I would like to ask you to stay one more minute because I want to introduce you to Josh Thoms. I first want to give you. Josh had an initiative that is called the Million Volt March, and the first intention was to do this march on Pearl Street here in the center, but logistically that is not possible. So we had to come up with a solution. The solution that we found is we would like to invite you to be on a group picture outside here at the hotel. We're going to do it from the roof. It's going to be a huge promotion thing for his Join the Million Volt March initiative and also for the GlobalBEM Breakthrough Energy Movement. It's going to be a powerful message to see so many people endorsing us, and so I would like to invite you to follow us. It's going to be on that corner. It's only going to take 10 minutes. We've got a photographer on the roof, so if everybody can put his thumb up or whatever, it's going to be nice. Josh, do you want to say something?
I just want to say thank you all so much for your sacrifice to humanity. Each one of you is doing an amazing part to change this world. Only together, through sacrifice, through compassion and understanding, can we really come together and change this world.
Yeah.
After the group picture, it's dinner time. And after that, we got a panel discussion starting around 7.